A freezing German shepherd begs for help, desperate and shivering in the cold. A man, seeing this poor creature in pain, makes a decision that will change everything. He brings the dog into his home, expecting nothing in return, just a simple act of kindness. But what happens next shocks everyone. The dog's past is more than anyone could have ever imagined. Why was this dog abandoned? And what happens when the man learns the truth? Don't miss this heart-wrenching tale of loyalty, redemption, and a bond that will defy all expectations. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Tom's shoulders slumped as he pushed through the heavy door of the animal shelter. His fingers, stiff from the cold, fumbled with the keys and the lock. The day had been endless. Cleaning kennels, handling paperwork, and try to comfort the anxious animals. Now, at nearly midnight, his breath came out in white puffs against the December air. The parking lot lights cast long shadows across the empty spaces. Most of the staff had left hours ago, leaving Tom to handle the final checks and closing duties. He pulled his thin jacket tighter, wishing he'd remembered his warmer coat. Just as he turned toward his car, a sound caught his attention. At first, it was so faint he thought he'd imagined it. Then it came again, a weak whimper carried on the bitter wind. Tom paused, tilting his head to listen. The sound seemed to be coming from behind the building. His feet crunched on frozen gravel as he made his way around the corner, using his phone's flashlight to guide him. The beam caught something moving in the shadows. Then, hair tied to a metal post, was a German shepherd. The dog's ribs showed clearly through its matted fur, and old scars crisscrossed its body like a terrible map. The animal trembled violently. Whether from fear, cold, or both, Tom couldn't tell. As Tom approached slowly, the dog raised its head. Their eyes met, and Tom's heart clenched. The dog's gaze held such exhaustion, such fear, that it made his throat tight. Despite everything the animal had clearly been through, there was still a spark of life in those eyes. Tom knelt carefully, keeping his movements slow and gentle. The shelter's policy flashed through his mind. All strays needed to be properly processed and evaluated for aggressive tendencies. Those deemed too dangerous or too injured were usually put down. Looking at this dog's condition, Tom knew exactly what would happen if he followed protocol. His hands hovered over the tight knot in the rope. The dog watched him, still trembling, but making no move to snap or growl. Tom could see its breath coming in short, painful gasps. "I can't leave you here," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I just can't." In one quick motion, Tom shrugged off his jacket. The freezing air bit through his thin shirt, but he didn't hesitate. He worked the knot free with shaking fingers, speaking softly to the dog the whole time. "Easy there, buddy, I've got you." The German shepherd didn't resist as Tom carefully wrapped his jacket around its bony frame. When he gently lifted the dog, it felt frighteningly light in his arms. The animal released a small whimper, but then pressed closer to Tom for warmth. Tom's car wasn't far, but each step felt crucial as he carried his fragile cargo. He managed to open the passenger door one-handed and settled the wrapped dog onto the seat, as carefully as if it were made of glass. The interior light illuminated the dog's face, showing more clearly the extent of his neglect. Tom slid into the driver's seat and cranked up the heat as high as it would go. As warm air began to fill the car, he looked over at his unexpected passenger. "Let's get you warm, buddy," he whispered, reaching out to adjust the jacket more securely around the shivering animal. Tom's hand shook as he guided his key toward the lock of his apartment door, the German shepherd's weight heavy in his arms. The stairwell's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting uncertain shadows on the worn carpet. His heart hammered against his ribs. Taking in strays was strictly against shelter policy, let alone one in such terrible condition. The thought of losing his job made his stomach twist, but the warmth of the dog's body against his chest reminded him why he had to try. Inside his small apartment, Tom kicked the door shut behind him and surveyed the sparse living room. The radiator hummed in the corner, providing the only warmth in the space. He grabbed an old plaid blanket from the couch and spread it carefully near the heater. Then he lowered the dog onto it with gentle hands. "Stay here, buddy," he murmured, though the dog showed no signs of wanting to move. Its eyes followed Tom as he hurried to the kitchen. His hands trembled as he filled a bowl with lukewarm water. In his cabinet, he found a can of soft dog food left over from fostering a senior dog months ago. The Poplican opening echoed in the quiet apartment. He arranged both bowls near the dog's head, close enough to reach but not so close as to seem threatening. The dog's nostrils flared at the scent of food, and its ears twitched forward, but it made no move to eat. Under the better lighting of his apartment, Tom could now see the full extent of the animal's condition. Ribs protruded sharply through matted fur, and deep scars ran along its sides like angry rivers across a map. Some looked old, others more recent. Tom reached out slowly, hoping to check for any immediate injuries, but the dog's lip curled. A weak growl rumbled in its throat, more fear than aggression. Tom pulled his hand back immediately. Okay, he said softly, settling cross-legged on the floor a few feet away. No touching, that's fine. He kept his voice low and steady, talking about nothing in particular. The weather, his day at work, the squirrels that lived in the tree outside his window. As he spoke, he noticed the dog's eyes slowly stopping their frantic darting around the room. Its breathing, while still shallow, became more regular. The hands of his wall clock crept forward. 1 hour passed, then 2. The dog hadn't touched the food or water, but its rigid posture had relaxed slightly. It no longer flinched when Tom shifted position, though its eyes still tracked his every movement. Tom ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion settling deep in his bones. The clock showed nearly 3 in the morning. I'll figure this out in the morning, he muttered more to himself and the dog. He pulled another blanket from the back of the couch and settled himself onto the worn cushions. As he drifted into an uneasy sleep, the sound of the dog's shallow breathing filled the quiet apartment. The soft sound of lapping water pulled Tom from his restless sleep. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting a pale glow across his living room. He blinked, turning his head slowly toward the radiator. There, the German shepherd was drinking from the water bowl, each lap careful and measured. Tom's chest filled with relief. After hours of the dog refusing both food and water, this small act felt like a victory. He watched silently, afraid that any movement might startle the animal back into its defensive state. When the dog finished drinking, Tom sat up on the couch with deliberate slowness. The springs creaked beneath him, making the dog's head snap up, but there was no growl this time. "Good morning," Tom said softly, keeping his voice steady and calm. "I usually start my day with coffee. Would you mind if I made some?" He continued this general monologue as he moved around his small kitchen, describing each action as he performed it. "Just getting the coffee grounds now. This stuff isn't great, but it does the job. Now for some water." The familiar routine helped calm his own nerves, and he noticed the dog's eyes following him with less tension than the night before. Back on the couch with his coffee, Tom pulled out his phone. He needed to call the shelter. They had to know about abandoned dogs in the area. Even if he couldn't tell them the whole truth, his finger hovered over the number as he studied the German shepherd more carefully in the morning light. Despite its terrible condition, there was something regal about the dog's bearing. Its ears, though torn, stood alert. Its dark eyes held a depth that spoke of both strength and suffering. "You need a name," Tom murmured, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. The dog's gaze met his, steady and profound. Something about those eyes reminded Tom of ancient ruins, something that had once been mighty, now broken but still holding dignity. "Rex," he said suddenly, the name coming to him like a memory. "What do you think about Rex?" He tested the name a few more times, letting it roll off his tongue. "Rex, hey Rex." The dog didn't respond to the name yet, but Tom didn't expect him to. It was a start, a small step toward giving this broken creature an identity beyond its scars. Tom spent the morning in his tiny kitchen, the sound of boiling water filling the apartment. He'd found some chicken in his freezer, nothing fancy, but better than dried dog food for a starving animal. As the chicken cooled on the counter, he glanced at Rex, who remained alert by the radiator. "Let's try this again," Tom murmured, tearing the chicken into small, manageable pieces. He sat cross-legged on the floor, keeping a respectful distance from Rex, and placed a few pieces of chicken between them. The scent of fresh meat made Rex's nose twitch. His dark eyes darted between Tom and the food, uncertainty clear in his rigid posture. Slowly, painfully slowly, Rex stretched his neck forward, snatching a piece of chicken before retreating. Tom's heart leaped as Rex chewed carefully, then reached for another piece. "That's it," Tom encouraged softly. "Nice and easy." With the small victory of feeding accomplished, Tom reached for the first aid kit he'd prepared. The moment his hand moved toward Rex with antiseptic wipes, a low growl rumbled from the dog's chest. Rex pressed himself against the wall, his scarred body trembling. Tom immediately withdrew his hand. Okay, he soothed. "No touching yet." "That's fine." He set the first aid supplies on the floor between them, letting Rex see them. "These are just a help, but we'll wait until you're ready." The rest of the day passed in a dance of careful movements. Tom went about his routine, reading, watching TV, doing laundry, while Rex observed from his corner. Every sudden motion made the dog flinch. The sound of a car backfiring outside sent Rex into a panic, pressing himself harder against the wall. But there were moments of progress, too. When Tom left to use the bathroom, Rex's ears would perk up slightly, tracking his movement. When Tom returned, the dog's posture would relax just a fraction. Each time Tom spoke, Rex's eyes would focus on him with growing recognition. As evening settled in, Tom prepared for another night on the couch. He laid out a fresh blanket near his makeshift bed, close enough to provide companionship, but far enough to give Rex space. The dog watched the gesture with wary interest. Tom settled onto the couch, pulling his own blanket up to his chest. The streetlights outside cast long shadows across the room, but Rex remained in his spot, not retreating further into the darkness. "You're safe now, Rex," Tom whispered into the quiet apartment. Rex's ears twitched at the words, and for the first time since arriving, his breathing deepened into the steady rhythm of peaceful sleep. The morning light filtered through Tom's small apartment window, casting a warm glow across the living room. His back ached from another night on the couch, and he groaned softly as he shifted to sit up. His muscles protested the movement, reminding him that he wasn't as young as he used to be. Tom's eyes immediately went to Rex's corner. The German shepherd was awake, his dark eyes alert and focused. When their gazes met, Tom expected the usual quick look away, the nervous shifting that had become familiar. But this time, Rex held his gaze steadily, something new flickering in those deep brown eyes. "Good morning," Tom said softly, keeping his voice low and gentle. Rex's ears twitched at the sound, but his eyes remained fixed on Tom's face. Moving with deliberate slowness, Tom made his way to the kitchen. He could feel Rex watching his every move as he prepared breakfast. More boiled chicken mixed with some rice this time. The routine of the past day had taught him to telegraph his movements, making each action clear and non-threatening. He placed a bowl of food near Rex, then backed away to sit on the couch. Rex waited until Tom was settled before stretching his neck toward the food, sniffing cautiously. After a moment's hesitation, he began to eat, keeping one eye on Tom. Encouraged by Rex's calmer demeanor, Tom reached for the damp cloth he'd prepared. He approached slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones. "Just need to clean you up a bit, buddy. Nothing to worry about." The moment the cloth made contact with Rex's matted fur, a deep growl rumbled from the dog's chest. Every muscle in Rex's body went rigid, his ears flattening against his head. Tom immediately stopped moving, his heart racing as he slowly raised both hands in a gesture of surrender. Okay, we'll try later," Tom said, backing away carefully. Rex's growl subsided, but his body remained tense, watching Tom's retreat. As evening approached, Tom realized he needed supplies. He couldn't keep feeding Rex just chicken and rice. The dog needed proper food, and Tom needed basic supplies if he was going to help him recover. "I need to go out for a bit," Tom told Rex, grabbing his keys and wallet. "I'll be back soon. I promise." The trip to the pet store took just under an hour. Tom loaded his cart with high-quality dog food, proper bowls, a soft bed, and various other supplies he thought might help. The whole time, he worried about Rex, wondering if the dog would still be there when he returned. When Tom opened his apartment door, his heart skipped a beat. Rex was still in his spot by the radiator, but something was different. Instead of the hunched, defensive posture he'd maintained since arriving, Rex sat with his head up, ears pointed forward. His eyes were fixed on the door, on Tom. A smile spread across Tom's face as understanding dawned. Rex had been waiting for him to come back. The next morning brought a gentle rhythm to Tom's small apartment. Sunlight crept across the worn carpet as he went about his morning routine. Every movement was measured and deliberate. Rex tracked him with those intelligent eyes, no longer shrinking away when Tom passed nearby. Tom prepared Rex's breakfast with careful attention, fresh kibble mixed with a little warm water, making it easier on Rex's still recovering system. But today, instead of setting down the bowl and retreating to his usual spot on the couch, Tom settled cross-legged on the floor, about 3 feet from where Rex lay. "It's okay," he murmured, keeping his voice soft and steady. "Take your time." Rex studied Tom, his ears moving forward and back as he processed this change in routine. The food's aroma filled the air between them, and Tom could see Rex's nose twitching, slowly, so slowly. Rex stretched his neck toward the bowl, his eyes darting between Tom and the food, testing, assessing. When Tom remained still, Rex began to eat, maintaining his awareness of Tom's presence but not letting it stop him. Later that afternoon, as Tom adjusted the blanket that had bunched up beside Rex, his hand accidentally brushed against Rex's front paw. Tom's heart jumped, expecting the usual growl or flinch. Rex's muscles tensed under his fur, but there was no retreat, no warning rumble. They both froze in that moment, suspended in this unexpected contact, taking slow, steady breaths. Tom carefully moved his hand to rest on the floor, close to Rex but not touching. He kept his palm up, non-threatening. Rex's dark eyes studied the hand, then deliberately looked away, a sign of trust that made Tom's chest tighten with emotion. That evening, Tom sat near Rex again, this time extending his fingers toward Rex's muzzle. The German shepherd watched the approaching hand, but his ears remained forward, relaxed. Then, in a moment that made Tom's breath catch, Rex leaned forward slightly and sniffed his fingers. The contact was brief, just a whisper wet nose against skin, but it was willing, chosen. "Good boy," Tom whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Rex pulled back after brief investigation, but the air between them had changed. Something had shifted, a tiny crack in the wall of fear that had surrounded Rex since his arrival. The morning light filtered through Tom's apartment windows as he watched Rex's peculiar behaviors unfold. A car backfired outside, and Rex's entire body went rigid. His eyes wide with terror, he scrambled backward, pressing himself against the wall, trembling. Tom's heart ached. As he witnessed the reaction, "It's okay, buddy," he said softly, keeping his distance until Rex's breathing steadied. Throughout the day, Tom noticed more signs. When Rex needed to pass through the narrow hallway to the bathroom, he hesitated, his body low to the ground. The darkness seemed to terrify him. Even the jingle of Tom's keys made Rex's ears flatten against his head. The most telling signs were physical. As Rex became more comfortable with Tom's presence, he allowed closer inspection. Tom sat beside him, speaking in gentle tones as he carefully ran his hands over Rex's thin frame. His fingers caught on something beneath the matted fur, circular raised marks that formed a pattern along Rex's rib cage. Tom's stomach clenched. He'd seen these marks before the shelter on dogs rescued from fighting rings, cigarette burns, deliberate cruel marks left by someone who had treated Rex as nothing more than a disposable object. His hand shook as he continued his gentle examination, finding more evidence of systematic abuse. Anger bubbled up in Tom's chest, hot and fierce. His jaw clenched as he imagined someone hurting Rex this way. But when Rex whimpered softly, Tom forced himself to relax. Getting angry wouldn't help. Rex needed calm, needed to learn that not all humans brought pain. That evening, Tom sat at a small kitchen table with his laptop open, Rex dozing nearby. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he researched rehabilitation techniques for abused dogs. Page after page of trauma recovery methods filled his screen. He took careful notes, determined to understand how to help Rex heal. But as he read through case studies and recovery stories, another thought kept nagging at him. Who had done this? Who had broken this beautiful animal spirit and then left him to die behind the shelter. Tom opened another tab, starting to research local dog fighting rings and recent animal abuse cases. "I'll find out where you came from," he whispered, glancing at Rex's sleeping form. "And I won't let them hurt anyone else like they hurt you." Tom paced the small living room, casting frequent glances at Rex, who lay curled up near the heater. The morning sun streamed through the windows, highlighting the dog's scar body. The shelter's policy manual sat heavy in Tom's hands. Section 4.3. All strays must be reported within 24 hours of discovery. His stomach churned as he flipped to the section about aggressive or traumatized animals. The words blurred together, but he knew them by heart. Dogs deemed too dangerous or too damaged were evaluated and most often euthanized. The shelter couldn't risk adopting out animals that might hurt someone. Rex lifted his head, dark eyes following Tom's movements. There was fear, yes, but also a glimmer of trust that hadn't existed days ago. Tom ran a hand through his hair, tossing the manual onto the coffee table. At work later that morning, Tom tried to act normal as he went about his duties. The guilt of keeping Rex a secret weighed on him, making his movements stiff and distracted. During his break, he found Lisa organizing supplies in the storage room. That night, Tom sat cross-legged on the floor beside Rex's blanket. The dog's breathing was steady, peaceful in sleep. Streetlights cast long shadows across the room as Tom watched Rex's chest rise and fall. The choice loomed before him. Follow the rules he'd sworn to uphold, or protect the dog who was slowly learning to trust again. Rex stirred in his sleep, a small whimper escaping him. Without thinking, Tom softly hummed a calming tune, something his mother used to sing. Rex settled, his breathing evening out once more. The moment crystallized in Tom's thoughts. He had to make a decision, and soon. The first rays of dawn crept through Tom's apartment windows, painting the walls in soft shades of pink and gold. He stirred on the couch, awakened by an unfamiliar feeling of anticipation, rather than his usual alarm. As his eyes adjusted to the early morning light, he found Rex's gaze fixed on him from a spot on the blanket near the heater. Rex's ears were perked forward, alert but not fearful. His body remained tense, pressed against the wall, but there was something different in his eyes, a glimmer of recognition, maybe even trust. Tom held his breath, not wanting to break the moment. "Morning, buddy," he whispered, keeping his voice gentle. Rex's tail twitched slightly, not quite a wag, but not the fearful tucking from days before. Tom's heart swelled at this tiny sign of progress. After their usual morning routine of fresh water and breakfast, Tom glanced at the leash hanging by the door. He'd been waiting for the right moment to try this. Reaching for it slowly, he watched Rex's reaction. The dog stiffened but didn't retreat. "What do you say we try something new?" Tom kept his movements deliberate as he approached Rex with the leash. To his amazement, Rex allowed him to clip it to his collar without resistance. The dog trembled slightly under his touch, but there was no growling, no attempt to pull away. Tom led the way to his apartment door, Rex following hesitantly behind him. As they stepped outside, a cold breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of autumn. Rex immediately froze, his tail tucking between his legs. His whole body went rigid, eyes darting frantically between the open space and the safety of the doorway. Instead of pulling or coaxing, Tom simply sat down on the concrete steps. He held the leash loosely, giving Rex plenty of slack. The morning air was crisp, their breath visible in small clouds. Traffic hummed in the distance, but their little corner of the world felt peaceful, suspended in time. "It's okay," Tom murmured, not looking directly at Rex. "We got all the time in the world." They sat in companionable silence for 10 minutes, Tom pretending to be interested in the falling leaves while keeping Rex in his peripheral vision. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, Rex shifted his weight forward. His front paw extended, touching the next step down with extreme caution. Tom kept still, fighting the urge to praise or encourage. He knew Rex needed to do this on his own terms. The trust building between them was as delicate as a soap bubble. One wrong move could shatter it completely. The morning sunlight warmed their faces as they sat together on the steps, sharing this small but significant moment. Rex hadn't moved any further, but that single step forward spoke volumes. It was more than just physical progress. It was a tiny leap of faith, a whispered promise of trust beginning to form between a broken dog and the man who refused to give up on him. Tom's footsteps echoed through the empty parking lot as he approached the shelter. His mind wandered to Rex, safely tucked away in his apartment. The German shepherd had eaten a full breakfast that morning, a small victory that brought a smile to Tom's face. The smile faded as he pushed through the shelter's front doors. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the familiar sounds of barking dogs filled the air. He'd barely reached the time clock when Sarah, the front desk volunteer, caught his eye. "Mr. Davis wants to see you," she said quietly. "He's in his office." Tom's stomach dropped. He nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral as he made his way down the narrow hallway. The shelter director's door stood slightly ajar, and Tom could see Mr. Davis hunched over paperwork through the gap. He knocked softly. "You wanted to see me, sir?" "Come in, Tom." Mr. Davis gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Close the door." Tom settled into the hard plastic chair, his heart pounding. The office felt smaller than usual, cramped with filing cabinets and outdated equipment. A no-kill shelter poster hung crookedly on the wall behind Mr. Davis's desk, a constant reminder of their perpetual struggle with limited resources. "We had a report," Mr. Davis began, shuffling through some papers, "about a stray German shepherd. Someone tied it up behind our building last week." He looked up, his eyes sharp. "You were closing that night, weren't you?" Tom forced himself to meet his boss's gaze. "Yes, sir, I was." "Did you see anything unusual? Any signs of the dog?" "No, sir." The lie felt thick in Tom's throat. "Nothing unusual." Mr. Davis leaned back in his chair, studying Tom's face. "Look, Tom, I know you care about these animals. We all do. But if you know something about this dog, you need to tell me. We can't afford to house aggressive or severely injured animals. Our resources are already stretched thin." Tom's fingers dug into his palms. He wanted to argue, to tell Mr. Davis about Rex's progress, about the trust slowly building between them. But he knew it wouldn't matter. The shelter's policies were clear. "I understand, sir," Tom managed. "If I see anything, I'll let you know." Mr. Davis nodded, dismissing him with a wave. Tom left quickly, his hands shaking as he closed the office door behind him. That evening, Tom sat cross-legged on the floor, beside Rex's blanket. The dog's breathing was steady now, so different from the shallow, frightened pants of that first night. Tom ran his hand gently down Rex's back, feeling the raised scars beneath his fingers. "They don't believe you deserve a chance," he murmured softly. Rex's ears twitched at the sound of his voice. Then, slowly, deliberately, the German shepherd shifted and rested his head on Tom's leg. The first time he'd initiated such close contact. Tom jerked awake to a soft thud against the hardwood floor. His heart raced as he bolted upright on the couch, scanning the dim room for danger. The sight before him made him freeze. Rex stood awkwardly in the middle of the living room, one paw slightly raised, staring down at a tennis ball. It was one of the old toys Tom had scattered around the apartment days ago, hoping Rex might show interest. Until now, the dog had ignored them completely. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting a warm glow across Rex's fur. The German shepherd's head was tilted slightly, ears forward with curiosity. Tom hardly dared to breathe as he watched Rex extend his paw again, touching the ball with careful precision. The ball rolled a few inches, and Rex took a small step back, watching it intently. Tom's chest tightened with emotion. This wasn't the desperate behavior of a dog, focused only on surviving. This was something different, something that looked almost like play. Rex nudged the ball again with his nose. His movements were uncertain and hesitant, but when nothing bad happened, he repeated the action, making the ball roll in a wobbly line across the floor. His tail remained low, but there was a new alertness in his posture that Tom hadn't seen before. Carefully moving as slowly as he could, Tom slid off the couch and sat cross-legged on the floor. Rex paused, watching him, but didn't retreat to his usual corner. Taking this as a good sign, Tom reached out and gently rolled the ball toward Rex. The German shepherd stiffened instantly, his muscles tensing. For a moment, Tom worried he'd pushed too far. The ball came to rest against Rex's front paw, and time seemed to stand still as they both waited. Then, with movements that seemed almost shy, Rex lifted his paw and tapped the ball. It rolled back toward Tom, not quite reaching him, but traveling in his direction. It was a small gesture, clumsy and uncertain, but it made Tom's heart soar. In that quiet morning moment, something had shifted between them. Tom studied the leash in his hands, taking a deep breath before approaching Rex. After nearly a week of indoor recovery, he knew it was time to try venturing outside again. Their first attempt had ended quickly, with Rex refusing to move beyond the front steps. This time would be different. Tom had a plan. He knelt slowly beside Rex, holding the leash where the German shepherd could see it clearly. Rex's dark eyes tracked the movement, but his body remained relatively relaxed, a stark change from his earlier days when any sudden motion sent him scrambling for cover. "What do you say, buddy? Want to try a little walk?" Tom kept his voice soft and steady, the way he'd been speaking to Rex all week. He waited patiently, letting Rex make the first move. After a moment, Rex stretched his neck forward to sniff the leash, his whiskers twitching slightly. Tom clipped the leash to Rex's collar with gentle movements, praising him quietly. Together, they made their way to the front door, Rex staying close to Tom's leg as they stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, and Rex's ears swiveled constantly, catching every sound of the awakening neighborhood. His steps were hesitant but determined as they made their way down the front path. Tom matched Rex's pace, never pulling or rushing him. They had made it halfway down the block when a car door slammed suddenly across the street. The sharp sound cut through the quiet morning air like a gunshot. Rex's reaction was immediate. His entire body went rigid, muscles coiling tight as springs. His breathing turned sharp and shallow, panic evident in his wide eyes. Tom immediately knelt beside him, keeping the leash loose. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice steady and calm. "You're okay, Rex. I'm right here." He continued speaking in low, soothing tones, not touching Rex, but staying close enough for the dog to feel his presence. For several long moments, Rex remained frozen, his chest heaving with quick, shallow breaths. But as Tom continued his quiet litany of reassurance, the tension in Rex's body gradually began to ease. His breathing slowed and his muscles slowly unclenched. Finally, he exhaled deeply, a long, shuddering breath that seemed to release some of his fear with it. When Rex took a tentative step forward, Tom felt pride surge through his chest. They continued their walk, taking it one careful step at a time. Each new sound made Rex's ears twitch, but he no longer froze in terror. Instead, he stayed close to Tom's side, drawing strength from their connection. By the time they turned back toward home, Tom noticed a subtle but significant change in Rex's demeanor. His tail, which had been tightly tucked against his belly when they started, now hung in a more relaxed position. Though he still watched their surroundings with intense focus, the raw fear in his eyes had diminished. As they walked the final stretch home, Tom observed how Rex's paws hit the ground with more confidence. His steps were steadier, his head held slightly higher. While he clearly wasn't comfortable with the outside world yet, he was learning to navigate it, one brave step at a time. The sharp knock at the door shattered the peaceful morning routine. Tom froze mid-motion, the bag of dog food clutched in his hands. His eyes darted to Rex, who had transformed in an instant from relaxed to alert. The German shepherd's body dropped low, muscles coiled tight as he pressed himself against the kitchen wall. His ears stood straight up, tracking every sound. Tom's heart hammered in his chest as he set down the food bag. He hadn't told anyone about Rex, who could be at his door. Moving quietly, he made his way to the entrance, trying to project calm despite his racing thoughts. Behind him, he could hear Rex's claws clicking softly on the floor as the dog repositioned himself. When he opened the door, his stomach dropped. Lisa stood there, her expression a mixture of concern and knowing determination. Her eyes immediately moved past him, searching the apartment until they landed on Rex's huddled form in the kitchen. Her arms crossed over her chest as she fixed Tom with a steady look. "I knew it," she said, her voice carrying a weight that made Tom's shoulders tense. Without waiting for an invitation, she stepped inside, closing the door behind her. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You took him, didn't you?" The stray everyone's been asking about. Tom ran a hand through his hair, guilt and defiance warring in his chest. I had to, Lisa. You should have seen him that night. He was freezing, starving. They would have put him down. He expected anger, maybe disappointment. Instead, Lisa's expression softened as she watched Rex, who hadn't moved from his defensive position but was watching them intently. I want to help, she said, surprising Tom into silence. She kept her distance from Rex, but her trained eye took in every detail. The way his coat had begun to shine with proper nutrition, how his ribs were less visible, the alert but not panic way he was assessing her presence. He looks better, she admitted, then turned to Tom with serious eyes. But the shelter is starting to ask more questions. Davis is pushing hard to find out what happened to that missing stray. You need a real plan, Tom, or they're going to find him. Tom sat cross-legged on his living room floor, a handful of treats balanced on his knee. Lisa had brought them over, special training treats. She promised she would help. Rex watched from his spot near the wall, nose twitching with interest. Okay, buddy, Tom said softly, holding up a treat. Let's try something new. He moved his hand in a gentle arc, bringing the treat up and over Rex's nose. As expected, Rex's head tilted back to follow the movement, naturally causing his haunches to lower. The moment Rex's bottom touched the floor, Tom clicked his tongue and offered the treat. Rex took it carefully from Tom's fingers, no longer snapping or shying away. Progress, Tom thought, warmth spreading through his chest. They worked like this for an hour, Tom introducing the word sit with each successful motion. By the end of the session, Rex was responding to command almost half the time. Not perfect, but a huge step forward for a dog who'd once been too traumatized to even make eye contact. Later that afternoon, Tom decided to build on their success with a walk. The day was mild, and the park was relatively empty. Rex padded alongside him, his leash loose between them. Tom noticed how the dog's head was held higher now, his tail occasionally swaying instead of being permanently tucked. Good boy, Tom murmured, and Rex's ear flicked toward his voice, recognizing the praise. The trouble came without warning. They were rounding the corner near the duck pond when a jogger appeared, his feet pounding the pavement as he ran straight toward them. Before Tom could widen the gap between them and the stranger, Rex's entire demeanor changed. The German shepherd hackles rose, and a deep growl rumbled from his chest. Tom tried to pull him back to create distance, but Rex was already moving with a sharp bark that seemed to echo across the park. He lunged forward, straining against the leash. The jogger stumbled backward, arms windmilling as he caught his balance. Hey, he shouted, face red with anger and fear. Control your dog. Tom's heart hammered against his ribs as he wrestled Rex back, putting his body between the dog and the jogger. I'm so sorry, he called out, but the man was already hurrying away, throwing dark looks over his shoulder. Other park-goers had stopped to stare. Tom saw phones raise and heard the murmur of concerned voices. Rex was still tense beside him, trembling with adrenaline. Everything they'd worked for seemingly erased in an instant. Come on, Tom whispered urgently, tugging gently at the leash. Let's go home. They hurried back to the apartment, Tom's mind racing. He knew how this looked. A clearly traumatized German shepherd attacking someone in public. If word got back to the shelter, if anyone recognized Rex as the missing stray, the consequences would be devastating. Inside the apartment, Tom sank onto the couch, his hands shaking as he unclipped Rex's leash. The dog retreated to his corner, as if he too understood what had just happened. Tom watched him, fear and determination warring in his chest. They'd come so far. He couldn't let one setback ruin everything they'd worked for. Tom's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, Mr. Davis's name flashing on the screen. His hand trembled as he reached for it, watching Rex doze peacefully in his corner. Hello. Tom's voice came out steadier than he felt. Tom, we need to talk. Mr. Davis's tone was grave. Got a minute? Tom sank into a kitchen chair, his free hand gripping the edge of the table. Of course, sir. Remember that stray that was reported missing near the shelter a few weeks ago? Mr. Davis paused, letting the question hang in the air. The German shepherd, yes, I remember. Tom's throat felt dry. Well, we received some concerning reports. Paper rustled in the background. Someone called in about an aggressive German shepherd at the park yesterday. Dark coat, scarring along the sides. Sound familiar? Tom's pulse quickened. There are lots of German shepherds in the area, sir. True, Mr. Davis's chair creaked, but not many with that specific description, and not many being walked by someone who looks exactly like one of my employees. Tom watched Rex shift in his sleep, one paw twitching as he dreamed. The dog looked so peaceful, so far from the frightened, aggressive animal he'd been just weeks ago. Tom, Mr. Davis's voice softened slightly, if you know something about this dog, you need to tell me. This isn't just about shelter policy anymore. We've got public safety concerns now. If you're hiding something, this is your chance to come clean. This is getting serious. Tom opened his mouth to respond, but the word stuck in his throat. Rex's ear flicked, and he lifted his head, dark eyes meeting Tom's from across the room. In that moment, all Tom could think about was the progress they'd made, the trust they'd built. I understand, sir, Tom managed. If I hear anything, I'll let you know. After ending the call, Tom set the phone down with shaking hands. The weight of anxiety pressed against his chest as he looked at Rex, who had no idea that their whole world was threatening to unravel. Tom's fist clenched at his sides. No matter what happened next, he wouldn't let them take Rex away. The stack of papers on Tom's coffee table seemed to mock him as he slumped on the couch. Lisa had been thorough. Each potential adopter looked perfect on paper. Good homes, fenced yards, experience with rescue dogs. She'd even highlighted the most promising ones in yellow. Tom picked up one of the applications, then let it fall back onto the pile. His apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in as he considered the possibility of Rex's leaving. The German shepherd lay on his blanket nearby, watching Tom with those intelligent dark eyes. I should be happy about this, Tom muttered, running a hand through his hair. These are good people offering Rex a chance at a real home. Something better than his tiny apartment with its cramped rooms and no yard. Something better than sneaking around, always looking over our shoulders. But every time Tom imagined Rex going home with someone else, his chest tightened until he could hardly breathe. The thought of coming home to an empty apartment. No Rex waiting by the heater, no gentle breathing in the quiet evening hours, hurt more than he'd expected. Lost in his troubled thoughts, Tom almost missed a slight movement beside him. A warm pressure against his knee made him look down. Rex had risen from his blanket and crossed the short distance between them. Now, his muzzle rested gently on Tom's lap, his eyes half closed in a gesture of complete trust. Tom sat perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. This was new. While Rex had grown more comfortable around him, he rarely initiated contact. The dog's weight against his leg felt warm and solid, grounding him in the moment. Slowly, carefully, Tom lowered his hand. Rex's ears twitched, but he didn't move away when Tom's fingers made contact with the soft fur between his ears. The dog let out a deep sigh and closed his eyes completely. Something shifted in Tom's chest as he sat there, gently stroking Rex's head. The dog, who once flinched at the slightest movement, now trusted him enough to seek comfort from him. The same Rex who had growled at human contact now leaned into his touch completely at peace. Tom thought about the day he'd found Rex, half frozen and terrified behind the shelter. He remembered the countless nights spent sleeping on the couch, speaking softly into the darkness, proving over and over that he could be trusted. He thought about the small victories, the first tail wag, the first playful moment with the ball, the first time Rex waited for him by the door. As he sat there, Rex's steady warmth against his leg, Tom realized something profound. All this time, he thought he was the one doing the saving. But Rex had given him something too, a purpose, a reason to fight, a companion who needed him as much as he needed them. Looking down at Rex's peaceful face, Tom knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't let him go. Rex belonged here with him, in this small apartment with its cramped rooms and no yard. This was home. Tom sat at his kitchen table, the morning light casting long shadows across its scratched surface. His phone lay before him, screen dark and imposing. Lisa's warning played on repeat in his mind. If they find Rex, they'll put him down. The words made his stomach churn. Rex dozed near the heater, his chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. He looked healthier now, his coat shinier, his frame less skeletal, but time was running out. They needed more than just hiding. Tom picked up his phone, turning it over in his hands. An idea had been forming in his mind, risky but potentially game-changing. People loved comeback stories, didn't they? And Rex's story deserved to be told. Opening his social media account, Tom began to type. He described finding Rex that cold night, barely alive and terrified of human touch. He detailed the slow process of building trust, the small victories that felt like miracles. With careful words, he painted a picture of Rex's transformation from a broken, abused animal to a dog learning to love again. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he considered what to share about Rex's past. The circular burn marks, the deep scars, the way he still flinched at sudden movements. All evidence of deliberate cruelty. Tom included these details not to shock, but to show how far Rex had come. Finally, he added a recent photo. In it, Rex sat near the window, his posture relaxed, eyes bright and alert. The difference from the frightened dog he'd found was striking. Tom read through the post one last time, his heart pounding. This could backfire spectacularly, but doing nothing wasn't an option anymore. With a deep breath, he pressed post and set his phone down. The response came faster than he expected. Within the first hour, dozens of people had shared the post. Comments poured in, words of encouragement, offers of support, and stories of other rescued dogs who had overcome similar histories. Some people asked how they could help, offering donations or supplies. Tom scrolled through the messages, hope building in his chest. Maybe this could work. Maybe public support could protect Rex from harm. His thumb froze mid-scroll. There, among the supportive comments, was a short message that made his blood run cold. Asterisk, that's my dog. I want him back. Asterisk. Tom stared at his phone screen, his hands shaking so badly he could barely scroll through Derek Marshall's profile. The message glared back at him, each word a hammer blow. Asterisk, you stole him. I want him back now. Asterisk. Rex stirred from his spot by the heater, sensing Tom's distress. His ears perked forward, dark eyes fixed on Tom with concern. Tom forced himself to take a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. The profile was sparse. No photos, no personal information, just a string of aggressive comments on various posts, many involving dogs. Tom's fingers flew across the keyboard as he texted Lisa. Can you help me look into someone? He wrote. Asterisk names Derek Marshall. Claims Rex belongs to him. Asterisk Lisa's response came quickly. Asterisk on it. Give me an hour. Asterisk. That hour felt like days. Tom paced his small apartment, checking his phone every few minutes. Rex watched him from his blanket, picking up on the tension. When Tom's phone finally buzzed, he nearly dropped it. Tom, this is bad, Lisa's message read. Asterisk found some old news articles. Derek Marshall's been investigated multiple times for running dog fighting rings. Never enough evidence to convict, but there are police reports. Asterisk. Tom's stomach lurched. More messages followed, each worse than the last. Links to local news stories about suspected animal abuse, screenshots of complaints filed with animal control, all connected to Derek Marshall. All dismissed due to lack of concrete evidence. There's more, Lisa wrote. Asterisk found some posts in underground forums. He brags about training fighting dogs. The methods he describes, Tom, the scars on Rex match exactly what this guy talks about doing. Asterisk. Tom looked at Rex, really looked at him. The circular burns that dotted his ribs, the old bite marks, the way he still cowered at sudden movements. It all made horrible sense now. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Derek. Asterisk, I know where you work. That shelter won't protect you. Get him back, or else. Asterisk. Tom's jaw clenched so tight it hurt. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture that made him sick. Derek didn't want Rex back out of love or concern. He wanted his fighting dog back, wanted to throw him back into that hell of pain and violence. Tom gripped his phone, knuckles white, as another threatening message from Derek appeared. Tom's free hand instinctively reached out to Rex, who pressed his head against Tom's palm. The trust in that simple gesture only strengthened Tom's resolve. Tom clutched Rex's leash tighter as they rounded the corner to his apartment building. The evening shadows stretched long across the pavement, and there, parked under a flickering streetlight, sat a dark pickup truck Tom had never seen before. His steps faltered as a tall figure emerged from the driver's side. Rex's body went rigid beside him. The German shepherd's ears flattened against his head, and a tremor ran through his muscular frame. Tom's heart hammered against his ribs as he recognized a man from the photos Lisa had found, Derek Marshall. Derek's heavy boots scraped against the concrete as he approached. His face twisted in what might have been meant as a smile, but looked more like a sneer. The streetlight caught the edge of old scars on his knuckles, telling their own story of violence. "You got my dog," Derek said, his voice deceptively casual. "Hand him over, and I won't make this messy." Tom's mouth went dry, but he forced himself to stand straight, to keep his voice steady despite the fear churning in his stomach. "You dumped him," he replied, surprised by the strength in his own words. "He's not yours anymore." Derek's eyes narrowed, and he took another step forward. The distance between them shrank to mere feet. "That's not how this works," he growled. Beside Tom, Rex's posture changed. The trembling stopped. A deep, rumbling growl rose from his chest, a sound Tom had never heard before, primal and warning. It wasn't the fearful reaction of a beaten animal, but the clear threat of a protector. Derek's lips curled into a knowing smirk. "Still got fight in him, huh?" "Thought so," he said, his eyes gleaming with predatory interest that made Tom's skin crawl. "Good to know all the training didn't go to waste." Tom shifted his weight, placing himself more firmly between Rex and Derek. His heart pounded, but his voice remained level. "You're not getting him back. Ever." Derek stared at him for a long moment, then let out a dark chuckle that held no humor. "We'll see," he said, turning away. His boots crunched on the gravel as he headed back to his truck. Tom stood rooted to the spot, watching as Derek's truck rumbled to life and pulled away into the gathering darkness. Only when the taillights disappeared around the corner did he release the breath he'd been holding. His hand was shaking as he reached down to touch Rex's head. The next morning brought a sharp knock at Tom's door. He opened it to find Lisa, her face etched with concern and her normally neat appearance slightly disheveled. She rushed inside, glancing around the apartment with quick, nervous movements before settling her worried gaze on Tom. "I got your message about Derek," she said, running a hand through her tangled hair. Her voice trembled slightly with barely contained anxiety. "What happened?" Tom sank onto the worn leather couch, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion. Rex padded over to sit beside him, pressing close as if sensing his distress. Tom recounted the previous night's confrontation, his voice tight as he described Derek's threatening behavior and the obvious connection to Rex's scars. His hands clenched involuntarily as he remembered Derek's cruel smile. "He's not going to stop," Tom said absently, scratching behind Rex's ears, drawing comfort from the dog's steady presence. "I need to make sure Rex is safe. Derek knows where we live now." Lisa paced a small living room, her shoes making soft sounds against the carpet as her brow furrowed in thought. Finally, she stopped and turned to face Tom, determination replacing her earlier worry. Her jaw set with resolve. "Then we fight back. We're not letting him win this." She pulled out her phone, quickly scrolling through contacts with practiced efficiency. "I know someone, an animal rights lawyer who's handled abuse cases before. She's tough, doesn't back down. And there's this journalist, Sarah Chun, who's been investigating illegal dog fighting rings. She's been looking for a solid lead for months." Tom straightened, hope flickering in his chest for the first time since Derek's appearance. The weight on his shoulders seemed to lighten slightly. "You think they could help?" "If we can expose Derek's operation and get evidence," Lisa nodded firmly, her eyes bright with purpose. "We might be able to get the law on our side, make it impossible for him to come near Rex again. He's got to have other dogs, other victims. We can save too." They spent the next hour making calls. Lisa explained the situation to her contacts while Tom installed security cameras around his apartment. He positioned them carefully, one facing the parking lot where occasional cars drifted past, another covering the building's entrance with its peeling paint, and a third monitoring the back door that creaked in the wind as evening approached, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges. Lisa left with promises to return tomorrow with more information. Tom locked the door behind her, double-checking each window before settling onto the couch. His muscles ached from the day's tension. Rex moved closer, pressing his warm body against Tom's leg. The German shepherd's presence was steady, grounding, a reminder of what they were fighting for. Tom ran his fingers through Rex's fur, feeling the raised scars beneath, silent testimonies to past cruelty. "We're gonna get through this, buddy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise I won't let him hurt you again." Rex leaned heavier against him, and Tom felt the dog's quiet sigh of contentment. In that moment, despite all their fears, they found peace in each other's company. A week had passed since Derek's threatening visit, and exhaustion hung heavy over Tom like a dark cloud. Dark circles shadowed his eyes as he moved through his apartment, checking the security cameras for the 100th time that morning. The constant vigilance was taking its toll, making his movements slower and his thoughts fuzzy around the edges. Rex padded quietly beside him, matching his pace step for step. The German shepherd's presence remained steady and calm, a stark contrast to Tom's nervous energy. Whenever Tom's anxiety peaked, Rex would press against his leg or rest his head on Tom's knee, as if saying, "I'm here, we're okay." Tom tried to draw strength from Rex's quiet confidence, but his mind kept circling back to Derek's smirking face and his threatening words. Every car that drove past the apartment made Tom's heart skip. Every shadow in the evening made him tense. He knew it was only a matter of time before Derek made his next move. The shrill ring of his phone cut through the morning silence, making Tom jump. The caller ID showed the animal rights lawyer's number. His hands trembled slightly as he answered. "Tom," the lawyer's voice crackled with urgency. "We've got a break. The evidence we've gathered, the testimonies, the medical records, the photographs, it's enough. We're getting a search warrant for Derek's property." Tom's breath caught in his throat. Hope bloomed in his chest, but fear twisted in his stomach like a cold knife. This was their chance to stop Derek, to end the suffering of who knew how many other dogs. "But if anything went wrong, we need to move fast," the lawyer continued. "The warrant will be executed tomorrow morning." Tom's mind raced. He couldn't risk keeping Rex here, not when Derek might lash out in desperation. He dialed Lisa's number, his voice tight as he explained the situation. "Of course, I'll take him," Lisa said without hesitation. "Bring him over now. It's safer this way." Tom knelt beside Rex, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck in a gentle hug. "Just for a little while, buddy," he whispered, "until this is over." The next morning dawned gray and cold. Tom stood among a group of police officers and animal rescue workers, watching as they approached Derek's property, a rundown house on the outskirts of town. The raid began swiftly, efficiently, with officers securing perimeter while animal rescue teams moved in. Hours passed. Tom's heart pounded as he waited, pacing back and forth on the street. Finally, the team began emerging, their faces grim, some fighting back tears. The lead officer approached Tom, shaking his head in disgust. "It's worse than we imagined," he said, his voice heavy. "We found dozens of dogs locked in cages in the basement. Some of them—" He paused, jaw clenching. "Some are too weak to even stand." Tom watched as Derek was let out in handcuffs, his face twisted in rage. Behind him, rescue workers carefully carried out dog after dog, each one bearing the marks of abuse and neglect. Relief flooded through Tom, mingled with deep sorrow for these innocent victims. But through it all, one thought kept him standing. Rex was safe now. Derek could never hurt him again. The morning after Derek's arrest, Tom walked to the sheltered doors with a different kind of nervousness than he'd felt in weeks. The familiar scent of cleaning supplies and dog food filled his nose as he made his way down the hallway, his footsteps echoing against the concrete floor. The usual morning chorus of barking dogs seemed subdued today, as if the entire shelter sensed a shift in the air. Mr. Davis emerged from his office. His usual stern expression softened. His tie was slightly crooked, and dark circles under his eyes suggested a sleepless night. He approached Tom slowly, hands tucked into his pockets. "I heard about what happened," he said, his voice gentler than Tom had ever heard it. "You did the right thing, Tom." Tom swallowed hard, preparing himself for a reprimand about breaking shelter policy. But it never came. His shoulders remained tense, braced for the worst. Instead, Mr. Davis gestured toward his office, inviting Tom to sit in the worn leather chair across from his desk. "Derek's arrest has opened up something bigger than we imagined," Mr. Davis explained, settling behind his desk and adjusting a stack of papers. "The police found evidence linking him to at least 3 other fighting rings in the surrounding counties. They're conducting raids as we speak. The evidence they uncovered was substantial." Tom listened intently as Mr. Davis detailed how Derek's arrest had triggered a domino effect. Documents found at his property had exposed an entire network of illegal operations, names, dates, locations. Derek had kept meticulous records of his cruel business. Each revelation made Tom's stomach turn, but also reinforced that he'd helped stop something terrible. "But there's something else," Mr. Davis continued, leaning forward, his chair creaking under the movement. "Your story, what you did for Rex, it's making waves. Several shelters in the region have reached out to us. They're reviewing their policies on handling cases like Rex's." He paused, a hint of remorse in his voice. "Maybe we've been too quick to give up on some of these dogs. Sometimes it takes one person to show us a better way." That evening, Tom sat on his couch, the weight of everything finally settling around him. The last rays of sunlight filtered through his window, casting a warm glow across the room. Rex lay beside him, his head resting trustingly in Tom's lap, his breathing slow and steady as Tom ran his fingers through Rex's fur, feeling the raised scars that told their own story of survival. He felt something he hadn't experienced in weeks: peace. Pure, simple peace. He didn't need the shelter's approval anymore. He didn't need anyone's permission to know he'd done the right thing. Rex was home, safe and loved. Looking down at the dog's peaceful face, at the slight twitching of his paws as he dreamed, Tom knew their bond was unshakable. That was all that mattered. In this moment, in this quiet sanctuary they created together. 3 months after Derek's arrest, Tom stood in front of a weathered brick building on the outskirts of town. The faded for rent sign had been replaced with a fresh wooden board reading "Last Chance Rescue." Though modest and with its peeling paint and overgrown grass, the building represented everything Tom had dreamed of. He watched as Lisa helped unload the first group of rescued dogs from a transport van. There was Max, a 3-legged German shepherd who'd been abandoned, Sophie, an elderly lab with cloudy eyes, and Bear, a Rottweiler who'd never known kindness until now. Their tails wagged tentatively as they sniffed their new surroundings. Their eyes held a spark of hope that touched Tom's heart. Rex stood beside Tom, his posture relaxed and confident, a far cry from the broken dog Tom had found months ago. He watched the new arrivals with interest, no longer showing signs of fear or aggression. Tom reached down to scratch behind Rex's ears, earning a gentle lean against his leg. The following weeks flew by in a blur of activity. Tom worked from sunrise to sunset, cleaning kennels, administering medications, and most importantly, spending time with each dog. He learned their quirks, their fears, and their dreams. Some, like old Sophie, found homes quickly. A retired couple fell in love with her gentle nature. Others, like Bear, needed more time to trust, but Tom never gave up. Each success story felt like a personal victory. There was a day Bear finally wagged his tail at a visitor, or when Max learned to run confidently on 3 legs. Tom documented their progress, sharing their stories on social media, showing the world that every dog deserved a chance, no matter their past or problems. Rex became an unofficial therapy dog for the newcomers. He seemed to sense which dogs needed extra comfort, often lying near their kennels or sharing his toys. His transformation inspired potential adopters. If Rex had overcome his past, so could these dogs. The rescue's reputation grew steadily. People began seeking them out specifically for dogs others had given up on. Tom worked with local veterinarians, trainers, and behaviorists, creating a network of support for each animal. He developed specialized programs for dogs with anxiety, aggression, or medical issues. One autumn morning, Tom paused in his work to watch Rex playing in the rescue's fenced yard with a group of dogs. Rex bounded to the fallen leaves, leading a game of chase. His bark was playful and free, yet every few minutes, he would trot back to where Tom stood, pressing against his leg before it turned to play. Tom smiled, remembering the terrified dog he'd found tied to that post. Now, Rex moved with confidence, his coat glossy, his eyes bright. He'd become more than just a rescue dog. He was Tom's partner in this mission, living proof that love and patience could heal even the deepest wounds. The rescue had transformed Tom's life in ways he never expected. His days were longer, harder, and more challenging than his old shelter job, but they were also infinitely more rewarding. Every small victory, every tail wag, every successful adoption reminded him why he'd taken this leap of faith. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Tom stood at the podium. His voice was steady and clear. The rescue's backyard had been transformed for their first annual fundraiser, with twinkling lights strung between poles and rows of folding chairs filled with supporters. Last Chance Rescue success stories lined the walls, photographs of dogs before and after their rehabilitation, each one representing a life changed. When we opened our doors a year ago, Tom said, gesturing to the building behind him, we made a promise. We promised to see the potential in every dog that others had given up on. His eyes drifted to Rex, who sat calmly near a young family. The German shepherd's tail wagged gently as he sniffed the children's outstretched hands. They were here to take home Oscar, a 3-year-old mixed breed who'd been deemed too energetic by other shelters. Tom couldn't help but smile at the sight. Rex had become an expert at putting new families at ease, showing them that even the most traumatized dogs could become loving companions. The scars on his body had faded, though they'd never completely disappear. But his eyes now shone with confidence and trust, a living testament to the rescue's mission. As Tom finished his speech and stepped down from the podium, a woman approached him. Her eyes were misty as she held out a photograph. Tom recognized it immediately. It was Rex from that first night huddled in the corner of his apartment, thin and terrified. The image brought back a flood of memories. The cold wind, the weak whimper that led him to Rex, the decision that had changed both their lives. I saw your story online last year, the woman said softly, her voice thick with emotion. It gave me hope. It helped me understand that sometimes the most broken ones just need someone to believe in them. She stepped forward and wrapped Tom in a tight hug. The gesture caught him off guard, but he returned it warmly. Thank you for saving him, she whispered as she pulled away. Tom glanced at Rex, who was now demonstrating his perfect sit for the children. He saved me, too, he replied softly, meaning every word. As the evening drew to a close and the last guest began to leave, Tom felt the need for a moment of quiet. He stepped outside, breathing in the crisp air. The sky was painted in brilliant oranges and pinks as the sun dipped below the horizon. Rex padded out to join him, pressing against his leg in their familiar way. Tom reached down to run his hand through Rex's fur, remembering all the moments that had led them here. The sleepless nights, the small victories, the setbacks, and the breakthroughs. They'd built something beautiful together. Something that gave other dogs the same chance Rex had been given. Looking down at his faithful companion, Tom whispered, "We did it, buddy. You're home for good." Rex's tail wagged gently, his eyes meeting Tom's with complete trust and love. If you enjoyed the story of Tom and Rex, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.